Hi there, this is David from Honest IELTS. In my last video on using AI for IELTS writing, I talked about how AI can be good for assessing and helping with some parts of language, especially sort of grammar and vocabulary, but can have difficulties when trying to sort of assess task response and coherence. For that reason, it cannot always give an accurate score, but it can still help to develop your writing skills. Today, I want to talk about speaking in the IELTS exam and how AI can help with that as well. And I think it can really help you. But like writing, it has sort of limitations about what it can and can't do, and what it's useful for and what it's not so useful for. Of course, AI is changing very quickly nowadays, so anything I say now might be out of date in a few days, weeks, even months, but this is the situation now. Let's start with the negative. What can't it do? And then let's move on to how it can actually help you prepare for your IELTS speaking exam. First, like writing, AI is not great at giving you a band score for your speaking. Like writing, it can vary up to 1 to sort of 1.5 band away from your actual level. So you might be band 5, but it can give you a score of 6.5. Obviously, this is not great and is not a really accurate reflection of your speaking ability. Now, why is this? Well, the criteria for IELTS speaking is in 4 parts. Fluency and coherence, lexical resource, which means vocabulary, grammatical range and accuracy, and pronunciation. You can probably guess which ones it's better at. Grammar and vocabulary it can really help with, but it finds it a little more difficult with assessing fluency and pronunciation. Now, this is for 2 reasons. One, it doesn't have the training of an IELTS examiner to understand fluency and pronunciation. But also, secondly, it's not really listening for those things, or it's not really designed to. AI is designed to communicate and understand you. And so it often fills the gaps in your fluency and pronunciation so it can understand you. This means it doesn't really know how to assess you. Only really a teacher and a very experienced one will be able to do that when particularly thinking about things like pronunciation. However, there are 3 areas: grammatical range, vocabulary, and extending your answers, where AI can really help you. Not as a sort of a replacement for practice with a real person. You probably still need that, and not as a way to get a band score, but as a tool that you can use every day, a little at a time, to build the specific skills that the IELTS speaking criteria are really looking for. And this will not only help with your speaking, but also with your writing, listening, and reading. This is what this video is about. Okay, let's look in more detail about what the examiner is actually assessing during the speaking exam. The speaking test is marked on 4 criteria, each worth 25% of your score. 3 of them are important here. First is lexical resource, which is about vocabulary. And this is not just whether you use the right word, but whether you use a range of them, more than the basic ones, whether they sound natural, and whether you can paraphrase when you need to. A band 5 response uses very basic vocabulary. A band 7 response will use vocabulary more flexibly, with some idiomatic language and also collocations, words that go together naturally. The second is grammatical range and accuracy. Again, accuracy matters, but so does range. A student who only uses simple sentences accurately will not score above a certain level, even if they make no mistakes. The examiner is looking for evidence that you can use complex structures, conditionals, relatives, passive forms, and use them quite naturally. The last one is the fluency and coherence criteria, and this relates to being able to kind of extend your ideas. Short answers do not demonstrate fluency. Fluency means you can develop an idea across several sentences, connect your thoughts clearly, and keep speaking without relying on the examiner to ask you more questions. And that is something that AI can really help you practice. Okay, let's start with grammar. I often notice with students with their grammar when they are preparing for IELTS is that their grammar is quite accurate, but they don't make many errors, but they don't use a lot of different grammatical structures. They use the same structures again and again, and they don't use more complex forms because they don't feel confident using them. But it's important for the IELTS exam to be able to develop a range of grammatical structures to use. Now, AI is very good at generating example sentences for any grammar structure in any context. And the key word here is context. This is not about grammar exercises and filling gaps. You need to see the structure used in the kind of language you will need on the speaking exam day. Let's look at an example of a prompt you can put into AI which can help you develop that grammatical complexity. So for example, let me take this prompt here. Give me 5 example sentences using third conditional set in IELTS speaking part 3 topics such as education, technology or the environment. Make them sound like a fluent speaker, not a grammar exercise. Okay, I'm going to put that into ChatGPT, the free version, and let's see what it comes up with. Okay, you can see some really nice examples there of third conditional sentences. This is with if clauses. So, for example, the first one, education. If school had focused more on critical thinking rather than memorization, students would have been better prepared for real-world challenges. Technology. If government had regulated social media earlier, we might have avoided some of the misinformation problems we see today. Lots of really useful sentences using that structure that you could easily use within the part 3 speaking when they're asking for a wider discussion on one of these topics. Okay, it's important that you put the grammar within a context and ask the AI to give you examples within these contexts, because this will help you see the kinds of sentences you can use in the exam. Another thing you can do is to take a topic you are already prepared for and ask AI to help you kind of upgrade a simple sentence into something more grammatically varied. For example, the prompt, here is my answer to an IELTS speaking part 3 question. I think young people use social media too much because it is easy and fun. Can you rewrite this using a more complex grammatical structure, such as a relative clause or a conditional? Then explain what you changed and why. Okay, let's put that into ChatGPT and see what it comes up with. Okay, so again, you might have your version of the sentence or your answer to the question, and you can put that into ChatGPT and see if it can sort of create a better one. And then you can understand why it wrote it or said it in that way. So you can see the rewritten answer. I think young people tend to use social media excessively because it's so easy to access and offers the kind of entertainment that keeps them engaged for hours. Okay, and then underneath it explains why and gives reasons. And again, this is really useful to read to understand what different ways that you can structure a sentence to make it more complex. I think the idea is that over time you'll begin to see patterns in these structures that will help you to use the language yourself in different topics and different contexts. Okay, let's now have a look at vocabulary. One of the things I notice again with students is they often just use a very limited amount of vocabulary. Again, because it's what they feel most comfortable with and easiest to use. They know what they want to say, students, and they do say it in the exam, but they use the most basic words available every time. Good instead of beneficial, bad instead of negative. They use more general words rather than the word which is best for that situation and sentence or context. Students often know the better words. The problem is that under exam pressure, they use basic words that they feel more comfortable with. And the only way to really stop doing this is to practice using more sophisticated and useful vocabulary in realistic speaking contexts. Not in sort of gap filling or lists, but in sort of sentences and conversation. And AI is a fantastic tool for helping with that. You can ask it to show you how a word is used, what other words go with it naturally, and what it sounds like in an IELTS style discussion. The key is to try to keep the context specific to IELTS topics. Okay, let's look at an example of a prompt you can use. For example, you can say, I want to improve my vocabulary for talking about education in IELTS speaking part 3. Give me 5 useful collocations, phrases where 2 or 3 words go together naturally with an example sentence for each. Keep the register appropriate for academic discussion. So if we pop that into ChatGPT, see what it comes up with. Okay, and you can see it gives you some nice examples, and you can record these like quality of education. And then it gives you a nice example. The quality of education can vary significantly. Access to education, academic performance, curriculum development, lifelong learning. Again, you need to be keeping records of these phrases and try to use them when, let's say, the topic of education comes up. Another thing you can use it for is to practice paraphrasing. The ability to say something in a slightly different way, particularly if a question has been worded in one way, you may want to sort of express the same idea but in a slightly different way. So you might want to use a prompt like this. Give me 3 ways to paraphrase the idea that cities are becoming too crowded using different vocabulary and grammatical structures. Make each version sound natural in spoken English. Again, let's just put that in. Again, you might want to put in a phrase that you've used and find a different way to paraphrase that. Let's see what. Okay, and again, it gives you some nice examples there. Cities are becoming increasingly overcrowded. Okay, well, many cities which were once quite manageable in size are now struggling with rising population density. If urban populations continue to grow at this pace, cities will become too congested to function effectively. Now, some of this is quite sophisticated, but I think it's showing you different ways of structuring that sentence or that phrase so that it expresses the same idea, but is a little bit different. Again, this is something to sort of practice regularly, trying this and trying it with AI to see if you're able to paraphrase them. Okay, another area that AI can help with is the problem of giving too short answers in the exam. This is fairly common in IELTS. A student is asked a question, they give a clear answer, but it's very short, and then they stop. The examiner has to ask another follow-up question. The student gives a short answer, another follow-up, and so on. This can even happen with native speakers who sometimes take the exam. You need that ability to develop an idea and to keep speaking, and this is what will take you from, say, a band 6 to a band 7. And this is important in both part 2 and part 3, and we'll look at those separately as they're slightly different. Okay, let's have a look at part 2 of the exam. Part 2 is quite a challenging part. This is where you're giving a topic card and a little time to prepare, and then you have to speak for up to 2 minutes without any help from the examiner. It's just you and the topic. Most students are good at the start. They can say a few sentences, but after 45 seconds or so, they start to dry up and stop speaking, and they can't think of anything else to say. And often there's a very long pause. That lost time costs marks for fluency, and it also means you don't develop and demonstrate your vocabulary and grammar range. Now, the solution is not to sort of memorize 2-minute speeches. You don't know what topic will come up, so it's really difficult to memorize a speech for every possible topic. And the examiner can see when you've done that. The solution is to have sort of a good structure and a way of organising your response so that you always know what's coming next in your speech. Again, IELTS can really help with this. It can help create cue card topics, so you have an almost unlimited supply of practice material. Secondly, and most importantly, it can help you to develop a structure for the long term and show you what a well-organised 2-minute response actually looks like. Let's look at an example of a prompt you can put into AI for this. It says, give me an IELTS speaking part 2 cue card on the topic of a place that is important to you. Then give me a model answer that lasts approximately 2 minutes when spoken at a natural pace. Structure the answer as brief introduction, description of the place, why it matters personally, and a reflection on what it represents to you. Do not predict a band score. When you read that model, you are not reading it to memorize it. You're reading it to understand what 2 minutes of extended speaking feels like. How many ideas it covers, how the transitions work, where the language is more specific or more personal. And then you can practice a different topic using the same structure. Let's have a look at this in practice. Let me just put that into ChatGPT. Okay, you can see it generates the card, and then it gives you a nice example of what a example answer might be. It's sort of a good 2-minute answer on that, and you can kind of see the way that it's structured, with a brief introduction, description, why it matters personally, and a reflection. Okay, and you can see that by the sort of the paragraphs there as well. Again, looking at good examples of long answers for part 2 can help you develop your own ability to do that, and you can use AI to practice. You can also analyze your own part 2 attempts as well. You can record yourself speaking, or you can just write down what you said, or simply type up a version of your answer, or you can use the speech function in AI to actually talk directly to it. And then you can ask AI to identify where the answer could be developed further. So a possible prompt is something like, here is my answer to an IELTS Part 2 cue card about a person I admire. It says paste your answer. I spoke for about 50 seconds. Can you identify 2 or 3 points in my answer where I could have said more? For each one, suggest 1 or 2 additional sentences I could have added, keeping the same personal tone. Okay. So I'm going to, again, I'll put that into ChatGPT, but I'll paste in an example of a student's response where it says paste your answer. Let me just... Okay, so let's have a look at what kind of feedback it gives us. So yeah, you can see it tells us where we could have extended that, the kinds of information we could have given. So he was a very hard-working man. He worked as a farmer his whole life. You could add, he could wake up before sunrise every day, regardless of the weather, and work long hours in the fields. Even as he got older, he rarely took a day off, which really impressed me. So you can see different examples of how you can extend your answer so that it can fill the time and demonstrate your knowledge of grammar and vocabulary. All right, now, part 3 is a different challenge. In that section, the examiner is asking you abstract questions about society, change, problems, solutions, technology, whatever the topic of the part 2 was, is extended in part 3. You're expected to give opinions and support them. The answers are going to be shorter than part 2, but they need to be a bit more sort of analytical and reflective. And again, the same problem appears here. Students will often give a short answer, but they won't develop it, and then the examiner has to ask another question to continue the conversation. So, what the examiner wants to hear is that you give a point or state your opinion, and then you back that up with an example or a connection to a bigger idea. Again, you can use AI as a speaking partner to practice giving longer, more developed answers. The key is to kind of set it up correctly, because if you just ask it to give you practiced answers, you will end up with a simple sort of Q&A, which is not what you need. So, for example, you can give this prompt: act as an IELTS examiner for part 3 of the speaking exam. Ask me one question about the topic of technology and society. After I answer, do not move on immediately. Instead, ask one follow-up question that pushes me to develop my answer further. Something like, can you give me an example? Or what do you think the consequences of that might be? Do not assess my band score. That last instruction is important, to not assess your band score. The focus here is on practice and just getting into the habit of answering these questions, but it's not about trying to sort of get AI to tell you exactly what your score is, because it's not very accurate at that. You want to develop the habit of just speaking more. All right, let's try that one in ChatGPT. I'll see if I can actually sort of speak in this one. Okay, so if I just paste that in, it should do it. You see, how has modern technology changed the way people communicate with each other? Now, you can see at the bottom here with ChatGPT, you can use voice. So I can switch to voice chat. So let's just try that. I think modern technology has really changed the way people communicate with each other. And I think social media has been a really, really big part of that. In the past, most communication was face-to-face. It was local. It was with people we knew. Whereas now we can communicate with people all across the world. But a lot of it is through a screen, or it's indirect through text. And it means perhaps, honesty and being clear with people is a lot more difficult, and there is the potential, I think, for a lot of confusion and miscommunication.
That's a really interesting point. Can you give an example of a situation where miscommunication via technology led to a problem, either in personal or professional life?
Yeah, I could give an example. Okay, I'm going to stop there, but you can see this is the kind of thing that would be really, really useful for you to use to practice with AI. Lots of opportunities to practice giving long answers to some of these more abstract or challenging questions. Okay, so what can we take away from this? Let us get back to where we started and the 3 things that we can use AI to help us practice. Obviously things like grammar range, use AI to practice using complex structures in realistic IELTS contexts, and to see how we can change a simpler sentence into something a little more complex. Use AI to build collocations and not word lists. Make sure you're asking for vocabulary and phrases and collocations around the topics that are likely to be discussed in the IELTS exam. You can find lists of these topics online. And use AI to practice sort of extending answers to questions, both in part 2 and part 3. Use it to practice long answers, or to ask AI to extend your answer in part 2, or get it to ask you follow-up questions in part 3. And for you can just focus on developing that habit of just saying more, and not just giving short answers. Like I said, AI is a fantastic tool, especially for practicing grammar and vocabulary and parts of fluency. It can't necessarily tell you what your band score is, and don't focus on that. Maybe in the future it will be able to do that, but for now you still need a human, an experienced teacher or examiner who can help you with that. In the description of this video, you'll be able to find sort of a list of the prompts that I've used in the video today. So if you want to use those and practice those yourself with AI, then please do. If you found this video useful, there's a link in the description to join the Honest IELTS WhatsApp and Facebook communities. I share practice prompts, vocabulary tasks, and lots of other things in those communities. And if you want to know where your IELTS speaking is at the moment, there is a link to a free 20-minute consultation on my website. As a former IELTS examiner, I'm able to give you quite an accurate and honest assessment of your English level and your sort of current state of IELTS preparation. Anyhow, I hope to see you in the next video. See you later.